I'm resident of Colorwood for YouTube, Joel Sates. I'm joined by my buddy Gordon Dymowski, my buddy Patrick McCray. We're here to talk Doctor Who. It's an episode called Ark in Space, which is interesting. It's sort of Noah's Ark, but in a very messed up way. I'll let these two gentlemen talk because they're big Doctor Who fans. Gordon, you go first.
Just a
Well,
guy.
I'd like to point out for the audience that the reason why Jules having Patrick and I talk about it, he didn't do the assignment. Ark in Space is a 4-part story. Jewel only watched 2 parts. So, Jewel, why don't you tell us what you thought of it?
Jewel was so sated, he rolled over, had a cigarette, a Dr. Pepper, and fell into a deep sleep until just now. Just from that.
Because saying that it's Noah's Ark but twisted does not describe what we're talking about, Jewel. Like, that's not even putting in any effort. It's like saying the Dark Shadows Daybook is all about wood paneling in the living room.
I wish. If Noah's Ark were twisted, only the birds would really be able to go through.
Okay, I did only watch the 2 episodes. I forgot there were 4. But the 2 episodes I did watch were the first 2. From a show standpoint, because I have not seen much Doctor Who. I think I've only seen 3 episodes of the whole series.
Mm-hmm.
I like how they shot this, how they put this together, the episode, the first part of this. And I like the acting for the most part. The effects are what they are. They're for their time. I'm not going to pick on them. But I like how you can clearly see where Alien got some inspiration from in these 2 at least in these 2 episodes.
Yeah.
That you can see where, because the people are in like these pods and they're asleep. And so I think Doctor Who may not get enough credit for helping the science fiction genre in a lot of ways.
Well, it actually does. And funny thing you should mention about Alien. Guess whose first job was being designer at the BBC?
Oh.
Ridley Scott.
Yes. Guess which show he was assigned to around October, November 1963?
Doctor Who?
Yep. He came this close to designing the Daleks, which are the major, because he was in the design department. But he said, I'll direct, it's more money. And then I think some of his first episodes were for a series called Adam Lives, which is about an Edwardian adventurer who comes back in the swinging 60s, and it's kind of an Avengers riff, and it's a Steed and Emma Peel Avengers riff, not,
the real Avengers.
Mm-hmm. And
you're talking about like classic Ray Fiennes, Uma Thurman.
Right. It doesn't quite work. But to go back to what Jewel was saying, and you're on probation, Jewel, because you managed to get through this review. I chose this episode specifically because it comes 10 years into the show's run. It starts as kind of a little Saturday afternoon family show where they go in the past to learn history, they go into the future to learn science, and they do sideways stuff because the writers are bored. And you've got a new producer and a semi-new writer. The producer is Philip Hinchcliffe, who's young, and he's seen the show, and he's like, we can do better. He works with a designer named Roger Murray Leach, who would later earn an Academy Award. And so he set about making the show a little bit more adult. Because by the time, in the late 60s, it was more like, I would say, Lost in Space. It was a good, solid adventure show. You wouldn't mistake it for like adult drama. And Hinchcliffe knew about He wanted to increase the horror aspect. He wanted to make it more adult. And then his script editor was Robert Holmes, who I think, I think I really wish I lived in the timeline where Robert Holmes was hired to write Dark Shadows in 1974. He starts with the show as he writes in the late 60s. He flourishes in the early 70s, so he becomes kind of a pretty good writer, and he becomes script editor. And this is their official first story. And Holmes loves Victorian and Edwardian literature, especially Victorian and Edwardian horror. He also has a fascination with like possession, cannibalism being taken over. I mean, he's basically Dan Curtis's writing wet dream.
There's this body horror. I mean,
Yes.
This is a lot of body horror in this.
Mm-hmm. And this is where the show is starting to. This is the start of what many fans consider its golden age, and and to me, the Hinchcliffe era. It's probably both in terms of tone and in terms of content, very close to Dark Shadows, where you could easily, for years, I thought maybe Hinchcliffe was like, learning about Dark Shadows through teen magazines, but Dark Shadows was never shown in the States until in the UK until the 90s. So,
wow.
So Patrick, what did you think of the episode?
I enjoyed it. It had lots of good speeches. It had sort of a Captain Kirk like, crossed with Spock, just appreciation for humanity and the necessity of saving humanity. It was big. It was a big story. It's all of the human race is doomed, and Doctor Who does that really well. It's not afraid to endanger the entire human race on a bi-weekly basis. So I really liked that. I did not like Harry very much. Harry really got, as far as companions go, I don't think Doctor Who was probably.
Well, he's out at the end of this season.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah. Because they actually only hired him because they thought they're going to be hiring an older actor, but that when they got the young active smoke show that is Tom Baker, it's like, ooh, this is not working.
Although Tom Baker sure looks maniacal a lot of the time when those eyes bulge and Well,
he'd been working on a construction site, making tea for the construction workers for like a while. He had been out of work, so he's like, paycheck, yeah, let's go for it.
Oh, I'm sure, because this is before he did the Harryhausen movie, where I think he's the villain. Is it Sinbad in the Eye of the Tiger?
Yeah, I think it's a Golden Voyage of Sinbad.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but yeah, I think it was around. I think it was within that year because I think he was hired based on that movie.
Okay, well, he's great in that movie. I mean, I love.
Yeah, great movie.
Great Treehouse and stuff. Anyway, yeah, I like the body horror stuff. What really brought me home. This is a subject I don't talk a lot about, but it was, working on Babylon 5. I worked in the art department, and so I'm very used to, when I see a science fiction show, trying to figure out how they did certain sets and how much they got so much mileage out of that corridor. And that corridor had so little to it, but was so well designed and well put together that it's just this immediately evocative set. And I think the fact that the set has so much white to it makes simple things like the doctor's scarf really stand out, and complex things, like the green and so on and so forth stand out. I think the sacrifice, the realization of why we're doing this and what's going on were really effective as story elements. No, I think it was exciting. I think there was pathos. And it's, the other thing that this this does, especially if you're looking at it on larger screens than Doctor Who was intended to be seen on, which is, anything larger than like a 14-inch screen in that era, is the costuming is an unsung hero on this show. The crew's costumes, for one thing, are really well fit, interesting, streamlined to look at, compared to how many layers they give Tom Baker to play with. And if you notice, as it goes on, he has all these different permutations. So although it's one thing, and although they don't have special effects really to speak of, they're able to visually give you so much texture to work with. And metaphorically, I think it says a lot about the Doctor. Mm-hmm. That, there's a lot of layers here, and he can reconfigure himself in all sorts of ways. So I don't know if that's the review you're looking for, but those are the things that stand out to me.
Yeah, well, that set, it actually features in another story later on, because it's basically there's an interesting diversion where they go do some time travel stuff, but they go back to the station at an earlier point for a different story. So they're using that to get, because that's how in England, when they were figuring out how are we going to do television, they started with plays, but then the BBC decided to stick to serials, serialized drama, because if you pay for like the Dark Shadow set, let's say it cost $10,000 in 1965 money, and they had a Doctor Who style budget. That set they could then depreciate over the course of filming, so that you don't have to worry about building set after set after set, and it becomes cheaper because you're not breaking it down after a 2-hour television play.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we got to be careful, because I think Joel's falling asleep.
Is he?
Yeah, he is. He's just
speaking very pear-shaped tones.
and I also think that and I think that Tom Baker's, Homo sapiens, what an incredible species, that speech, I think that, and Jonathan Frid's speech in episode 212 about, why didn't you save me, Josette? I became something my father loved. I think those are two of maybe the greatest television speeches ever committed to video, because they're not just about outlining a character and defining a character. It's the actor announcing that this is their role and this is how they're going to play it.
I agree. And can I throw one more in, just for the hell of it?
Okay.
Risk is our business.
Mm-hmm.
From I think it's Return to Tomorrow. Spock is right about this, but Dr. McCoy is also right. Risk, gentlemen, risk is our business. That one, that's a hot one.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Do you have a hot one that you're thinking of?
No.
Well, while you were
out.
Well, yeah, while you were out before recording, Jewel was talking about how you were laying several hot ones.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah, and I think too, I deliberately chose Tom Baker because he is a lot of people's first Doctor. And
I think if you are over a certain age, mm-hmm. I think, if you're over the age of 40, probably 35, 40, mm-hmm. even if you've never seen Doctor Who, if someone says Doctor Who, or if someone had said Doctor Who at a certain point, Tom Baker is what comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's a question for you guys. Is there an actor who played Doctor Who that either A, you weren't happy with their performance, or B, somebody wanted to see play Doctor Who?
Well, lots of actors, like any great British actor, or just great actor, you think this is a great opportunity. Sure, I want to see this guy play Doctor Who. I'm not unhappy with any of them. I'm not one of these people who's got like a real axe to grind against, Sylvester McCoy or something like that. I try to find things to appreciate with all of them. I haven't seen any of Jodie Whittaker, and I haven't seen any of Peter Capaldi either. So, take that as but it's not a show I've ever watched regularly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think with actors, a lot of times when you watch Doctor Who, either the classic stuff or the new stuff, the actor can do an exceptional job, but the writing, unless the writing is there, they're going into. You can see where the actor is at least trying to. Colin Baker, who's no relation to Tom, who comes in the mid '80s, suffers from this because there may be one, maybe two okay stories he's in, and he's doing his best, but everything else is just dreck. And and at that point, the script editor and the writer were fighting like cats and dogs. It would be like if Gordon Russell and Sam Hill decided to go to war with Dan Curtis and stole his golf club so he couldn't wallop him with it.
That would have been interesting. Okay, the first 2 episodes I saw, I did enjoy the set. I liked how the phone booth fit. They made it fit. They made it make sense. And I like the introduction of the creature you get. It's very classic horror. Like, they're dead, but how long have they been there? It was very alien-esque. And then there's another creature. There's another one there,
And there's a yo-yo.
Yeah, I'm measuring the gravity.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question, Joel, and I want you to answer me honestly.
Sure.
Okay.
Taking my boots off for this one.
Did you get a summary of this episode through Chat GPT?
No, but I'll tell you what. The episode, the way they shot this, I was telling my wife this. It felt like I was at times the people's hair and stuff, like it looked like bad 70s porn.
Well, the director of this particular episode is basically a very workmanlike director, Rodney Bennett. So I've not watched a lot of late 70s porn, so I can't speak to that style. Patrick, have you seen a lot of late 70s porn?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. The not coming through. Have I watched much bad? No, not bad. Not bad 70s porn.
Okay, then I guess it's just Jewel. Then I guess he's our expert.
Colt Falcon on the scene. It's more.
I am an expert of nothing. But no, like for the 2 episodes I watched, the acting was enjoyable. You know?
And it works if you watch them all. Like you can watch 2 at a time, but it's best if you watch the whole story, because you much get a better sense of, because Doctor Who is it is very serialized drama, and it does do like self-contained stories, but those stories are spread over several episodes. So
in Jules' defense, it was for an American. It's not. It doesn't even say part 1 of 4 or something like that, and so it does kind of drop you off at the pool, because we're used to, I think, at most 2-parters in the U.S. For the most part, except for Dark Shadows, which is a 1,225-parter, but. Because even I asked you last night, like how many segments was this in? So Joel, how many did you think this would be? Did you think this was just going to be like a 1 episode, like Jack or something?
I knew there was 4. I just forgot to watch the other 2.
Yeah, and Tubi doesn't do any favors, because it's. Sorry, Patrick.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, it doesn't do the viewer any favors, because it's like. It'll be like episode X, Ark in Space, part 1, and so you're confused. It's like, okay, it's this season, this episode, but it's part 1 of a different story. So it's,
that is confusing. Yeah. Well, it's like they break Dark Shadows into seasons.
Yeah.
Which so many people have tried to do, and it makes it really confusing when you try to talk to people about the show and they've only seen it, categorized by things like Tubi or Amazon Prime.
Good old streaming services.
Well, but it gets it to us.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and right now, advertiser-supported video on demand is services like Tubi are kind of the hip new wave. In fact, they just announced today they'll be streaming several of the DC animated movies, a couple of their newer movies, including The Batman.
So the BM will drop on Tubi.
Yep, basically.
Nice. What do you guys hope to see? Well, before I get to off topic, what's your favorite scene in this episode, in the whole part 4 of it?
A Homo sapien monologue.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the set piece.
Cool.
And don't worry, Doctor Who does fun stuff. There's actually a nice little wacky Western comedy called The Gunfighters that's in black and white. Don't worry, Joel. One of these days, if you're a good boy and Santa gives us okay, we'll watch it.
Now, Joel, you don't have access to Max, do you?
HBO Max?
Yeah.
We used to have it, but we don't know more.
Okay. So it would be curious to have them watch the Van Gogh episode, just as a total contrast. Not only in terms of tone, but of era and budget and everything else, just to see what that's like.
Is there anything you guys want to add about these 4 parts? Or?
They're great. This is great TV. And I'll tell you what, there's something else that I think is really important to talk about in terms of Doctor Who's placement in the firmament of TV science fiction. Starting, I guess, Twilight Zone went on the air, I think 1959, 1960. So starting then, for 10 years, the 60s had some really interesting science fiction. It was at least fun, and that ended with the last episode of Star Trek. Janet Lester. And then I want you to think about this. TV science fiction in America, which could have stood on the shoulders of Star Trek, instead completely abdicated its powers of clever storytelling, good writing, and challenging politics to Norman Lear. Rest his soul, who just died. But, it's kind of like the American sitcom took over in the commentary department. And that's fine, but we could have had both. And TV science fiction in America sucked. From 1969 until 1987, when Next Generation went back on the air, with a few notable exceptions, that we had to try to get excited about crap by Glenn Larson. I mean, really? And that was it. That was the best of it. There was the Harlan Ellison Twilight Zone, and that was good, but that was kind of an anomaly. And as an anthology also, so who cares? And so in that time, who was doing interesting, well-written, character-driven, brainy, continuity-chocked, challenging science fiction, even though it was on, the budget of the lunch money of one segment of, the Cockfosters, underground. It was Doctor Who. And especially to be someone who lived in a city with good public television where they were getting this stuff fairly regularly, Doctor Who was the only game in town, and we're really blessed. We live in an era now where speculative fiction TV is all over the place. It might not always be good, but at least there's a lot of it. Sturgeon's law dictates that while 90% of everything is crap, 10% isn't. And if you're making a lot of this stuff, then 10% of a lot is a lot. And it's a hell of a lot more than we got in the 70s. And so, to paraphrase the book of Job, where were you? Not you, Jewel, but, just where were you, American television, when England was doing all the heavy lifting with this? And is it perfect to American eyes? Not always. Is it familiar to American eyes in terms of its pace of storytelling and all of that? Not always. But it sure beats beady.
Mm-hmm.
Look. Seriously, I loved that stuff as a kid, but even then, I knew it wasn't. Hell, that wasn't even Space 1999, and Space 1999 was being made in England.
Mm-hmm. Gordon?
My defense.
Yeah. Well, I think that, one of the great things about Doctor Who being on Tubi, which is free, is that you can check it out for yourself. And Tubi even has a section called New to Who, which has a couple of stories from each Doctor. I question the choices, but and I think, I've loved Doctor Who since I was 8 years old. I saw one of the early distributions of the show with John Pertwee, long before Tom Baker was syndicated. So I think there's a real charm to the show. I think, the drawback is that I think a lot of the fandom really needs to, you've got the obnoxious, you've got the whiny ass man babies who are like, continuity, they don't do it like I want it. You've got people who really invest so much into it it's less about enjoying the content and more about just the it's like they love the show so much, but they don't necessarily have a sense of proportion about it. But this is I love it because it's one of those shows. It's like Dark Shadows. It can go anywhere and do almost anything.
Yeah, for sure. Is third? Oh, what's tomorrow's? Let's see. Hold on a second. Yeah. Is Thursday good? And what's the next Doctor Who episode you want to watch for Thursday night?
Well, Jewel, is this something you're enjoying, or is this something like a judge has ordered you to do?
No, I just honestly forgot to watch the next two episodes. I'll watch it with you guys for sure. I just tomorrow night I'm doing Watership Down on a friend of mine's channel.
I'd take an antidepressant before you do that one.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh man, what a depressing movie. It's a good movie, but there was a time, Jewel, you didn't exist at this point in the 70s when that was it. For that and Fox and the Hound were it for animation in theaters. And what a depressing era that was to grow up in. You have no idea.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Oh, it was awful.
I've seen the movie before, but
okay. Well, I've just selected an episode. It's 4 episodes, and I'll send you both the link. And it's a story called The Brain of Morbius. And what I want both of you to do, both of you, especially Jewel, is to think about it. It's a slight adaptation of Frankenstein. So I want you to start thinking about it in comparison to how Dark Shadows handles similar material.
There's a strong Frankenstein motif to the way I believe the 8th Doctor is introduced in his regeneration.
Mm-hmm.
So there.
And Jewel, this is 4 parts.
Yeah.
Just remember,
There are
4
parts. Lights. There are 4 lights, Jewel. We will show you Doctor Who. That's my Doctor Who villain.
4 parts. I'll remember that and watch all 4 parts this time.
Jewel, if we were watching a Dark Shadows episode, you'd watch it 4 times in a row.
I would. I really goddamn would. That's the thing. Like, how did I forget to watch the other two?
It's
I
okay.
just literally forgot about them. I watched the first two. I was interested in it. I just forgot to watch the other two. But I won't forget to watch the other two this time. Or next time, sorry, for Thursday night. So is 10 p.m. Thursday night good?
Yes.
It is languid and flaccid, and I'll be there.
Link to the Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound is going to be in the description box. Go pick that up if you haven't already. Link to Gordon Dymowski's Amazon page is going to be in the description box. Gentlemen, you have a good night and Godspeed.
Good night, all.